Are they about to give you your own money back? All this and more on the Self-Evident Podcast. Welcome to the Self-Evident Podcast. You got Mike. Massey is on his way back home, so you will see him Monday. But for today, you got me. Before I get into all of it, because you might get some money back from the government, and, it might be reaping the benefits of what's going on right now. But we'll talk about that. Before we do, go to theselfevidenttruth.com, get yourself some merch, get a shirt, get a book. Don't forget, we do have the Church Liberated book. You can pick that up on Amazon. Just search Church Liberated. It'll come up. We worked hard on that thing, and it really does feel like a cool result of years, really, of work and thought and faith and theology and philosophy and history and all of that we've immersed ourselves in. And we wanted to put it to paper to inspire you to be able to go out and do something. And that way you don't have to listen to those voices who tell you, well, you're not allowed to talk about any of this. You're not allowed to put your opinion out there. You're not allowed to influence the world at all because you should stay within the four walls and just give the gospel. And that's the only thing, and anything else, just we've got a reason for why you can be influential in this world. So go get yourself the book, pick up the shirt. Got plenty of tour dates coming up, so check out the website for that. We got the homeschool conventions that are gearing up, and man, what a great, this year is definitely the year of the youth for us. Massey is going to be speaking at the homeschool conventions. He's got the camps that he's going to be at that are youth camps. So it's very much the year of the youth. That next generation of mentoring, of discipling, of ministering to them. And that's the big thing, that if you've never been to one of our events, you really don't know what it's like. And I have flat out had board members who are like, people don't understand until they're actually there, because we may start out with history and quotes, but that's really just the vehicle for us to be able to minister to people. And we use those quotes, we use history as the inspiration to what God can do today, and how important it is for us to have an honor and respect of the Lord in our daily lives. And flat out, we want to pray for people, we want to minister to people, we want to speak into people, heck, pray for healing, give words of prophecy, words of knowledge, words of wisdom where we need to. And it's a blast, and I love seeing people transformed when we do these events. So by all means, if you are in the area, stop on out, say hi to us. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to do the little screen of infinitum. Did that work? Yep. So $5,000 DOGE checks. Now, if you remember a couple of years ago, during the whole COVID thing, there were several times where the government gave out stimulus checks. And it was a bit of a question on all of it as to how should I feel about this. And Massey and I would have conversations about it. And DOGE checks, I'm going to get into that whole thought process. But thinking back to the stimulus checks, at first it was like, don't you dare bribe me with my own money and pat me on the back and, whoa, we're giving you some money and we're going to stimulate the economy by giving you money because you need it in this hard time. My response was, it was my money to begin with that you took from me. And now you're bribing me with it. And you want me to be happy with you because you're bribing me with my own money. But at the end of the day, my thought was, no, I'll take it and cash it because it is my money. Their motives don't matter. It's my money. Give it back to me. Now, DOGE. The idea here, so DOGE is doing their whole thing. Their goal is something like $1 trillion in cuts and savings and efficiencies. Somebody posted on X to Elon Musk a savings or a plan of taking 20% of the savings and handing it back to tax-paying families, which would amount for about 79 million homes, $5,000 checks. And just like anything, which this is one thing that I love about this administration, is Musk actually watches his Twitter. He doesn't have it there and post something up and never look at it. He watches it, and when ideas come across his board, he actually brings them to the drawing table. And Trump has said that he loves the idea of giving some of the savings from Elon Musk's DOGE back to the U.S. citizens as kind of a dividend. I'm going to bring this back to me. You read enough of it. This is a really interesting idea. And I will say it goes to the crux of things that I've thought about in the past. So when you look back at the bank issues, the whole financial crisis of 2008, and this is just a microcosm of this idea of our money. And I'm going to explore a couple of different topics in terms of our money, and I'll get back to DOGE because I think this is important to flesh this out. Back during 2008, we had the crisis, things collapsed, the banks were the bad guys, they were the villains, and I'm not defending them. They were the villains. They were also government coerced into becoming the villains because the government was saying, no, you need to loan out to these people. So the bank said, well, okay. And the banks were riding a free ride of government will cover us, which they did. Well, then it turns around several years later. Oh, well, we've got to punish these banks for what they did. And there was a couple $2 billion in fines that were given. Now, where do you think that money went? That money stayed in the government and went to special interest groups. That money did not go back to the taxpayer, did not go back to the people who got burned by the whole thing. And there were a lot of victims in the whole thing. There were also a lot of people who flat out got mortgages they should not have gotten and were handed the things, and then they failed because they couldn't do it. Now, some of those people probably didn't realize they couldn't do it. A lot of those people probably realized they couldn't do it, but they did it anyways. And the system collapsed under the weight of stupidity and lack of standards. But that money didn't make it back to the taxpayers. So you got the banks got fined, and the government said, we're doing this on behalf of the people because the people got burned, the people got hurt, and now we're going to punish the banks. Yet we didn't get restitution. Special interests got restitution. Certain groups got restitution. The government got restitution, and a pittance in all of it, but it was something. And then you have the situation where government tells states, well, you're not going to get funding in this area unless you do what we're telling you to do, which Trump's administration is actually doing that with some states as well in terms of sanctuary cities, illegal immigrants, all of that. I really don't like that concept because what you're saying is you're going to pay money to me, and then the money that I could give back to you to encourage this program, I'm not going to give that back to you. Well, it was my money to begin with. And now you're trying to blackmail me with my own money. And I think states, if they want to assert some type of independence in this whole system, they've got to push back on that whole concept. So you're going to bribe me with my own money. You're going to blackmail me with my own money. So then we get to the stimulus checks. And with the stimulus checks, it was very much, you're being bribed with your own money, guys. And people were so excited. I get a stimulus check. I get a stimulus check. What are you going to spend yours on? It's your money. It's just like the tax return. Guys, in case you didn't know, the tax return that you get so excited about is not the government being kind and generous to you. It's the government saying, well, you paid us a little too much. And it's forced savings is really what it is because you choose that. And so you pay out extra to them and then they give it back to you. It's a underhanded psychological trick to promote and stimulate spending. Because that money was already gone in your head, and then you get that big tax return back. Oh, now I can buy that big screen TV I've always wanted. And it goes right back into the economy, and guess what? They make money off the taxes as soon as that money changes hands. So it's a great deal for them. So the stimulus checks were basically, well, we closed all your businesses and we crushed you financially, and we're crushing you psychologically, and we're oppressing you, but here's a couple $1,000. Happy day. Now DOGE. This $5,000 check thing is a different premise. And I had somebody, I was on the phone with a buddy earlier, and we were talking about a project. He asked me if I had done the podcast yet, and I said no. My brain is fried. I have no ideas. I don't want to talk about anything. I really don't want to do any videos today, to be brutally honest. And I've got other videos I got to do for my own channel. And you know, you grind when you have to, I guess. And I was like, dude, what should I talk about? He's like, well, I'd be interested on your take on the $5,000 checks. And I was like, actually, that's a good idea, because I've thought a little bit about it, and I'm a little bit on it. So it's like, shoo, I'll shoot out my opinion. And if you're driving along, or you're going for a run, or you're watching, I appreciate you just sitting back and chilling with me, because this is a thought that, how do I feel about it? Is it constitutional? That's a good question. The House controls the purse strings. However, and this is something that both sides have not been very accurate about. The House has control of the purse strings. The bureaucracy that DOGE is going after is under the executive branch. And some people have pointed out, and if we didn't point this out the way we should have when we covered DOGE last time, I apologize. DOGE was already a government, an executive branch bureaucracy founded, I think it was in the 60s. It was already there. But it was under a different name. And then it was there for, if I remember correctly, that was USAID was the 60s. DOGE was a different one under Obama. Obama instituted, I think it was like 2012. It was for technology, for updating the infrastructure. And in a fit of genius, Trump and probably Musk took this bureaucracy that was already established by Obama and approved by Congress, just renamed it and widened the scope of it. But the whole premise is we're updating the systems and we're verifying the systems, and it's the IT infrastructure, which just so happens to include, hey, are there algorithms or code that are spending uselessly? Are there programs that should not be? Now, you get into the whole USAID thing and where money is going, and it is very much a soft power influence organization that works complementary to the CIA in terms of winning hearts and minds or changing structures in foreign governments for American interests. And that's a whole side topic that we could get into. But DOGE was actually already there. It was just under a different name. So they took this, changed it to DOGE, and hey, we don't need approval for it. We've already got it. Now, the purse strings belong to the House. Why is that? Because the House, they are the people. The original construction of it was the House is built from the people. And similar to the British Parliament, you had the House of Commons, common people, a House of Lords, the aristocracy, the professional political class would be a more benign way to say it. It's similar in America. You have the House of Representatives who are representing the people, and then the Senate, which is the supposedly professional political class. You give the purse strings to the people because the people are they're going to be more careful with it because they know it's the money of their constituents. Now, before the 17th Amendment, the Senate was chosen by state legislatures. They were ambassadors of the state at the federal government level. That's how you can think of it. If the federal government is the states coming together to determine for themselves how things are going to be governed between them and to the world, the Senate was really the construction of ambassadors from the states going to the federal government and pleading the case or pursuing the motives of their state. The 17th Amendment changed that to a popular vote. So then all of a sudden they become of the people. So the original construction, there was more influence and significance in the House having control because guess what? The House was the voice of the people. They should have the control of the purse strings, which is actually pretty darn brilliant by the founders. And I know some of you think they couldn't have possibly had a good idea amongst them because they're all white men and slave owners and evil, rich Christians. But I would argue that was a pretty good idea in theory. Now, obviously, things fall apart. It's just second law of thermodynamics, right? Everything leads towards decay. This would be somebody in the comments. Anyways, so they have control of the purse strings. Now, the question is, the funding was already approved for these organizations, for this bureaucracy over in the executive branch. So that funding is there. Some people might argue, well, this is a constitutional crisis because Trump is doing something that Congress should be doing. He's not. He's doing what's within his purview of authority over these bureaucracies. You think of him as the CEO over departments within his, if we liken it to a corporation. He owns a corporation. Corporation has departments that carry out the day-to-day affairs of the corporation to keep it going into the future. Consider him the CEO of the executive branch. He is in charge, so he can make hiring and firing decisions. Now, there are certain aspects where Congress has to approve or the Senate has to approve. So there is that attempt at checks and balances. But under the funding side of things, what they're really doing is the money that's been allocated to those organizations, they're merely telling those organizations you can't use that anymore. And they're saying, we're not going to spend money on this anymore. So it's their own orders to their own people, and in many cases, they're firing their own people so that money is not spent. And there is a windfall of that money that was already allocated to those bureaucracies. That's where I think I'm okay with it. And I'll tell you why on a couple of different levels. That money was already allocated to those bureaucracies. Now, there's an option. That money either sits there and gets vacuumed back into the mass swamp. And where does it go? Well, thankfully, it seems Trump would have more of a reason to pay attention to where it goes. But there's a variable there. Or, if as much as is reasonable, you take that money and instead pump it straight back to the citizen, I'm kind of happy with that. Because what that tells me is that money won't go back into the system and get lost, quote unquote, somewhere else. It goes back to us, tax-paying citizens, the middle class, the ones who, the small businesses who get nickeled and dimed at every corner, which I'm praying Trump is working on that whole aspect too. And hopefully the whole FinCEN thing will get cleaned out where we don't need a database of every single small business owned, and if you don't, you get a big fine for not being a part of that database. And what is it, the BOI, business ownership information, something like that. That money that we get nickeled and dimed on at every expense, every turn, 4, 5, 6 levels. I'm totally happy with, okay, we took a lot from you, but at least here's a little bit back that we were able to save because we cut a bunch of these inefficiencies. Now, you can argue about how well that's going in terms of cutting inefficiencies, and it depends. Do you bleed red or do you bleed blue? Because your opinion of it is going to be swayed by the messaging of the news that you're paying attention to. If you pay attention to conservative news, they're hacking everywhere and they're saving billions upon billions and they're almost to their trillion. If you ask the Democrats, of course, nothing's changed. They're really just hurting the government. They've only saved a couple $1 billion. They're never going to make their couple $1 trillion. And even then, they're hurting critical infrastructure. And I've got opinions, but I wouldn't call them expert opinions on that side of things. So here's where I stand on all of this. I could consider myself prideful and say, no, I'm not going to be bribed by you. But at the end of the day, it's my money. Congress already allocated it out to the executive branch. The CEO, quote unquote, of the executive branch is now telling his own people what to do with the money, which is send it to the American people. Don't waste it on yourselves. Send it back to them. Cool. I'm fairly happy with that. Now, if somebody can come up with a really strong constitutional argument as to why this shouldn't happen, by all means, put it in the comments. And I mean that honestly. And those who have a strong constitutional argument against DOGE itself, by all means, put it in the comments. Honestly, I'm not looking for a fight. I'm looking for, hey, do you see something that I don't? Unfortunately, typically what the comments are is, how dare you, you're so stupid, or you evil person, which, yeah, people get a life. So this is where I'll end this. Mike, okay, we get it. I'm interested to see what happens moving forward with DOGE, with these government changes, these changes to the infrastructure. I know there were people who were really freaked out about Hegseth being in charge of the DOD because he's a military man but doesn't have any experience within the giant swamp, which I think my argument about Hegseth, and I know this is a side tangent, I think my argument about him is that whole machine needs an outsider. Now, I get it. People see him. He's never run something that big. Trump never ran anything big before he became president. Obama never ran anything big before he became president. It's one of those things where you can't really know it until you do it, I think. And most of the insiders, here's the other issue that I think I see with the whole Hegseth issue. Any of the people that you might look at first glance and say, oh, I think they can do it. They have the experience. They know they've been on the inside. That's the problem. They've been on the inside. When you get to that level, it's more political than military. It's a very political machine. It's tribalism. And so most of those people are in the revolving door of the military-industrial complex. So for me, it's kind of like, I'd rather see an outsider and I'll take the chance. You may have a different opinion. That's fine. But I would argue that the Afghanistan withdrawal is a perfect example of that's what the establishment was already doing. That's what the swamp was doing. And that's the result that they got. Because a guy like Lloyd Austin, who you would argue is one of those with the experience and the know-how and the years of service that could handle that job, that's what happened. So if I'm watching the Afghanistan withdrawal, which is a complete disaster beyond belief because it was political in motivation and it was lack of thought on any of it, and you almost argue it was intentional, then I've got to say that I'll take my chances. And watching what Trump is doing with his various picks, I say I'll take my chances, and people will hear that as, oh, so you totally approve. RFK Jr. I don't know, man, because he's an ideologue, which is good because he's got convictions, but it's also bad because he sees government as a tool to get his ideologies across. And while, and my more libertarian friends will disagree with me here, I don't necessarily have a problem with banning certain substances in our food. Just like we can reasonably ban rat poison. And I don't have much of a problem with ban rat poison in food, I should say. I don't have much of a problem with that. So if there are chemicals in our foods that are being used that are not good for us, healthy for us, then do you need red dye 5 for your food? Is it integral to make the food? And if it is established that it is cancer causing, I don't know that I have a problem with banning it. And I can understand the argument, well, where do you draw the line and all that? But watch these guys carefully. And of course, Democrats are afraid of Elon Musk, who used to be their darling, and say he's power hungry and he's taking over. I think he's doing the job that he was called to do. But I don't want these guys to get too big of heads. And Trump the other day posts "Long live the king." Now I know part of it was a troll. Guaranteed it was a troll. But pick your shots, bro. Because at some point, is that really how you see yourself or not? Now, of course, the Democrats went ballistic, and 250 years ago, we fought a king. And oh, you mean those same guys that you demean as evil, wicked, slave-owning white men, right? Those guys are the ones now you're lifting up, and they were heroes against the king, and they fought for us, and now we're trying to continue that legacy, and you call yourself a king. We're a constitutional republic. Oh, there it is. But we will see. We'll see how it all goes down. They may not even be able to send out the $5,000 checks, but you may get a payment. You may get some money. And if you do, pray about possibly getting yourself a book or a t-shirt at theselfevidenttruth.com. Or you can go on Amazon, search Church Liberated. That book will get to you. No time flat. You'll love it. It's for you. And please, if you purchase the book, and this is to those of you who already have, and you buy it on Amazon, please leave a written review of the book. The reviews help bolster the book. And the algorithms and AI and all of it works, especially on written reviews. And this was something I was learning recently. Or if you, shameless plug, if you've purchased my book on Amazon or on my website, please leave a written review. It helps because people read reviews. I will read reviews for several hours before I purchase a product. So it helps other people know how you felt about it and whether or not they should buy it. And if at least for my book, even if you didn't like it, write a written review. Why not? I support people putting out their opinions. I might not agree, but free speech, America. All right, I'm going to get going. I'll let you guys have your day. So I hope all of you have a great day. Go to theselfevidenttruth.com. Get some merch. Think about donating. Pray for us as we are going out this year throughout the nation, especially getting to the youth and ministering to them. But we love you guys. We'll see you all Monday.